And now, the survival show that once survived fishing with dynamite in the shallow end of a pool. In this episode, we sit down to discuss and try to figure out how long you should prepare for. Howdy, and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 155. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Okay, boys and girls, it is just you and I today. I hope everyone out there in the roving horde had a safe and happy New Year's Eve. 3 quick things before we really dive in. First, the show's schedule will be back to normal probably around the second week of February. Apparently, buying a house, selling a house, planning a move, trying to keep up with everyone and everything has been a bit of more of a challenge than I had initially thought. So, poor planning on my part. Sorry about that, everybody. Plus, we're having to constantly have people in the house as we're showing it, so that makes recording a little difficult. Anyway, we'll be back to normal in just a few weeks. Second thing, this is going to be a shorter episode, sort of like the summer shorts, because I only want to talk for 15 minutes or less. And I'd rather have you spend the rest of the time you would normally listen to this thinking about the 3 main things that I'm going to throw at you today. The third thing, support the show and the work we do here by becoming a member. You can learn more about the benefits of membership by visiting itrh.net. If you're new here, that's how we keep the lights on and keep the microphones hot. Again, visit itrh.net today. All right, let's get into the show. For me, the weeks preceding New Year's are a time to consider the future and what I'd like to get done. Some people call that setting resolutions, in part. I like to think of it more as assessing the current state of my life, the past year, assessing how well my plans moved forward, and then revising and refining existing plans. It's akin to a business plan, and reviewing and refining a 5-year business plan is kind of how I look at it. The first step involves considering what I'm doing, who I'm doing it with, why I'm doing it, and for how long I might be doing it. That brings us to the big question that most of us wrestle with about, well, how long do I prepare for? How long to prepare for is an interesting question. And I've wrestled with it ever since the start of this. And the reality is I still wrestle with it, even today. And from what I can tell, so do all the old timers in the community. What complicates it is, well, things change. Our outlooks change, our concerns change, our perspective of what we actually have power over, and what we really can do, that all changes. But I think the biggest problem is we run into not thinking through why we're doing what we're doing, beyond just saying, the zombie platypuses, they're on the march any day now, so I'm going to start preparing. That's usually about the extent of where people think of why they're doing what they're doing, particularly in preparedness. The way to get past this is by asking yourself and honestly answering 3 questions. What do you think is going to happen? How bad do you really think that's going to be? How long do you think that'll last until some sort of infrastructure or barter system or something else is back up and running? See, even when we've seen stuff go down throughout history, a barter economy, some sort of infrastructure does start to come into play. As they say, an often overused cliche, nature abhors a vacuum. So it does get filled with things. The world doesn't just stop spinning. So we do have to take that into consideration. But to go back to how we typically start prepping, for me, early on, I just buy stuff or throw down new skills and think about things as they popped into my head. So it was really easy to fall prey to simple solutions that we hear other people throw out. For example, people love to throw around the 10,000 rounds is the ideal end all be all greatest thing for your ammo storage. 10,000 rounds. But this is a completely arbitrary number. What is it we need 10,000 rounds for? Are we really prepared in every other way necessary to survive how long it would take to go through 10,000 rounds of ammunition? I mean, 10,000 rounds is a huge number. Have you ever done the math on how many rounds you'd need to fire of each caliber on a daily basis to actually go through that much ammo? Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't love to have 10,000 rounds of ammo in each caliber. I completely would. Here's the rub, though. I can also say it would not be a good use of my financial capital in my life. For perspective, 10,000 rounds is about $2,000 of cheap ball ammo, or $5,000 of 10,000 rounds of premium 9mm ammo. This number excludes shipping, of course, for you nitpicky sorts out there. Now, for 5.56, that goes anywhere from about $5,500 up to $7,500. 308, that's going to run you about $9,600 to $12,000. Those are retail prices. I'd have to pay them too. Last I checked, Hornady, Gym Tech, or Federal aren't sponsors of this show. Although if they're listening, I'd be happy to talk to you guys about that. Now, some of you may be thinking this. Aaron, I'm planning for Titawaki. Zombies are coming, man. Okay, I don't judge, and I feel your pain. So we'll work through this one together. If you think the grid will go down for that long, why not go with the flintlock rifle and pistol? Why not go with black powder? You can make everything you need from one of those darn things indefinitely with the right knowledge and skills. You can't indefinitely make new stuff for conventional centerfire. So how long are you planning on being without for? And how long is that 10,000 rounds really supposed to last you? Again, we go back. If you think it's that bad, perhaps you should be looking at, black powder and flintlock, things like that. That brings me back to how long. I can't say exactly why, but I've personally settled on 2 years for some things and 1 year for other things. For some people, 3 days may be enough. 3 weeks may be enough. 3 months may be enough. That's totally up to you. Again, it goes back to those 3 questions. What do you think is going to happen? How bad do you think things are really going to be? How long will it last till barter or some other infrastructure support starts back up? Now, for me, things that seem more difficult to make or procure after a semi to full Titawaki, get the 2-year treatment. If it's likely to also be a high quality barter item after these situations, it goes into the 2-year bin. And I'm not going to confirm or deny that I'm at 2 years. And I'm going to say a lot of things I'm not personally at 2 years yet. It's slow and steady wins the race for me personally in the way that I look at prepping. It really comes down to what makes me feel good. Personally, I've found 3 months to feel okay. 6 months, I feel good. 1 year, I feel safe. 2 years, I feel complete, no matter or just about no matter what comes next. Now, a 5-year supply of dental floss makes me feel silly. Wish I was kidding about that one. But what about 3 years? Many people speak of this 3-year number as being this kind of prepper holy grail. 3 years is a very long time to prep for, especially if we're talking about you completely living off your stores and only occasionally eating other people. It's doable, but really expensive, and you'd need a lot of storage space. Plus, you'd need a location you could easily defend for that long. And so there's another expense because you're probably not doing this out of your suburban home, and you're darn sure not doing this out of your urban home. So where does all this stuff live? With the exception of one thing I can think of, most situations have resolved themselves relatively quickly, or never completely broke down in the first place. We can use two different examples. One is Fairfall and his accounts of what happened in Argentina. Life didn't stop happening. In fact, it kept happening. It's just that it became harder to get goods. Everything became a lot more expensive, and things became a lot more violent. The only time I can think of where there really was a situation where things really drug out for a very long time, and I can't remember exactly how long, was in the Balkans. Many of you are familiar with that story. Basically, the area that the guy was in got locked down, nothing in, nothing out for an extended period of time in this region, so they were cut off. That's so incredibly unlikely for the vast majority of people listening to this show, if anybody even at all listening to this show. So it's not something to really take into account. It's not something to prep for. The other thing to remember is you have to start with the absolute basics before you get to the really long-term stuff. And the funny thing is, the longer you're in it, the less you worry about that kind of stuff. And the more you just say, I'm concerned about these simple things. So I want to have this much food on hand. I want to have this much money available to me. I want to have this much cash available to me somewhere. And for many, they want to have a certain amount of precious metals available to them for barter or for whatever they think is coming next. Again, you have to look at the main three things. What do you think is going to happen? How bad do you really think it's going to be? And how long will it take for barter or infrastructure to start back up again? Finally, we touched on guns and bullets and stuff with that one example of 10,000 rounds. But always remember this. You'll eat and drink more often than you pull a trigger. Plan accordingly. And with that, we wrap up episode 155 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. I thank you all for joining us today. And one last time, the show will resume its normal schedule mid-February. There should be at least one or two more episodes out between now and then, but I am dealing with some personal stuff as my life shifts and moves and reaccommodates and does all those things that it needs to do for my personal future plans. And the good news is we get a brand new studio out of all of this. So I'm really excited, and I'm really excited to share 2016 with you guys. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.